We've yeah, I think I want to start with a story. We're going to talk about memory links, and I love office supplies. I love pens. I've got collections of pens. The writing I do is on this special paper. I write with an ink fountain pen on both sides. A whole lot of stuff. That goes back, as some of you have heard me say before. My dad was a school teacher, and some of my earliest memories, I think, before I went to school, he was a primary school teacher. We never went to his school. That was very clear. But he loved it. And he liked going in on Saturday morning, and he'd take me with him. And even now I can remember the smell of a sort of cupboard and the picture of a sort of big wooden cupboard that had pencils and notebooks in it, okay, and had a particular smell. So I've got all these really, I love going into sort of stationery shops and and I love my pen collection, and it's so big I can't really add to it. And that's relevant, and all those positive referrals are relevant to, me getting down to the organization and the writing and having accepted efforts there, and, having the gimmicks that make something an accepted effort. And some of that's my pens. And I love Sharpies. Now, Sharpies have a completely different feel. Okay, think about that. You've got a line that's memory links. Nikki probably doesn't know it. Positive. Me about pens. Sharpies are in England anyway. They're often there's often a real special on. Okay, so there's a set of 36, and you can buy it for £5. They're often on sale in England. Sharpies. And then Donald Trump made it a symbol of his presidency. He signed everything with a Sharpie. That's sort of a good example of memory links. They come in at different times of our life. So, I pick up a Sharpie now, and it's got that memory link in it. We represent memory links on a line with sort of crosses and zeros, crosses and circles, better way to put it. And the circles are a positive memory link, and the crosses are a negative memory link. We've had that diagram here before. My hesitation is I'm finishing the diagram, okay. And what an overwhelming memory link moment is when a number of memory links come in at the same time, okay? And I think it's a place where in Pellin, to refer back to some of the material I've been putting out recently, and that is about how we have clarity and precision. These tools can provide us with clarity and precision. And we can, with memory links, find a pattern. We can find a pattern, and we can find a pattern that is quite accurate. And I believe that with the Pellin material, and certainly some of the places I want to take it forward, I just had another memory link come in, pop. Is that Leonard Cohen tomorrow?
Yes.
Thank you. Canada. What a shame it's such a terrible national anthem. But yeah, well, yeah, a sane country in the world. Yeah, and I was talking to Nikki today about the stuff about, yes, let me put that in here. So we can have overwhelming memory link moments that can literally be a definition of what a mental breakdown is. It's just too much. So there's these theories. I've got a diagram with sort of 5 on it, the diagram sort of like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll work on it. Yeah, so there's these, different memory links coming in, right? There's a sort of central one that's going on for us that, say, someone's, their relationship is breaking up. That's sort of everything. The relationship is breaking up and it's thrown them into anxiety attacks, hypothetical example. But at the same time, the political climate is awful for them. And that goes back in memory links because, their dad lost his job in the Depression. And they've also, as part of the relationship breaking up, my hypothetical person has got real doubts about their sexuality and where it's taking them. So that you've got the relationship, and the relationship and anxiety attacks, that's the issue, right? What we're saying in Pellin is what are the possible surrounding issues? So here we're saying, what were they? Sort of politics, doubts about sexuality. The central one is the relationship breaking up and anxiety. That's the heavy black line. But these others are coming in. And then someone, there's a tornado. It's Alabama and there's a tornado and the person has scary tornado moments. That's another memory link coming in because there's, going back, maybe the person lost an uncle in a tornado. So that's 4. And then, a person at work has been appointed to the senior person who doesn't like Harry. So Harry's my hypothetical example. And Harry's not been able to handle strong women, okay? And the person coming in is a strong woman. And not being able to handle strong women has its own set of memory links. So you got 5. You got the central one, relationship breaking up, anxiety attacks. The political climate, the weather, doubts about sexuality, and doubts about being able to handle the boss at work. which all of a sudden emerges as rather complicated because of not being able to handle strong women. But what you have is those 5 things coming in at one time. And that creates violent and destructive pendulum swings. Each of them sort of feeds on itself. So all of a sudden, the relationship breaking up seems simply unbearable, not going to survive it. So, thoughts of suicide. But maybe, and not always the case, but maybe what's going on here, there are these other issues. There's this thing about the tornado, there's this thing about sexual identification, there's this thing about politics, there's this thing about handling a boss at work. If you took one of them out, and you had 4 instead of, say you took the one at work out. The old boss Harry's boss doesn't change. He's got the same boss, and he's got on well with that boss for 7 years. All of a sudden, it's more manageable. If you take out another one, there were no tornadoes this year. So then you just got 3 instead of 5. And it's a different, okay, the relationship is breaking up. Not sure about his sexuality, and the political thing is still lousy. But it's just those 3, it's not 5. And one of those situations where, 5 is 3 times more than 3, or 5 is 3 times more than 2. So if you took another one out, so if you took the politics out, we have just had, it's been a bit boring, why can't she, sometimes make more sense, and, her goddamn husband is still a drag. But okay, we just re-elected Hillary Clinton. All right, she's been our president for 4 years, and we just re-elected her. And just take that particular thing out of this overwhelming referral moment with my hypothetical person. It's a nice tool. It's a nice tool. You have the other side of it. There's, you could almost argue that happiness is a positive, overwhelming memory link moment. All these things coming at once. It's a great, the weather's good. Someone just reminded me of Leonard Cohen. That just reminded me of my Canadian identity. That reminded me of my kids. The election went the way it went, and okay, expansion Pellin, new Pellin, hard work, but I've sort of got good feelings about it. But those good feelings, these other memory links come in, and including the Sharpies. And, I'm inspired by Joe Biden, and he quite a bit reminds me of my dad in his both manner and appearance. So, that's another positive memory link coming in. We don't need to analyze happiness. And in fact, if we analyze happiness, we run the risk of destroying it. So when we talk about overwhelming memory links moments, it's almost looking at the really worst of things. and to be able, and this was your phrase years ago, Nikki, to be able to separate the strands out. Because in our psyche, in our psychology, in our emotional strata, it's not like these separate things, which are clearly separate and have different colors. It just all comes together as one terrible feeling, terrible memory link. I'm sorry. Yeah, terrible memory link, but particularly terrible pendulum swing. Wipe out feelings of accomplishment and just be pulled into attraction to her. That's what happened. But your phrase all that time ago, Nikki, was separating the threads, okay? So there are all these threads all together and we're separating them out and seeing them as, different colors, maybe different shapes. So just to go over that a moment, hi Cease.
Hi.
What I'm talking about today is what we call overwhelming referral moments. In our current language, overwhelming memory link moments. And that's when a number of things come in and to create within us an impossibility. And I've got 5 here coming together at that moment. And the example I was giving was a hypothetical person called Harry. His relationship is breaking up and he's having, huge anxiety attacks. But at the same time, there are tornadoes in Alabama and he's got bad memory links about the tornadoes because close uncle died in a tornado when he was a kid. He's got doubts about his sexuality, the political outcomes he wanted did not happen. I think that's 4. And he's got a new boss at work who's a woman, and he's had trouble with strong women. That's 5 things coming together that, do it this way. Five things that come together that create this overwhelming feeling that, I can't cope, it's too painful. But with this tool, we can separate out the different strands. And the way I'm taking the teaching today, there are 5 strands there that are feeding in that negative memory link moment. When I talked to you, it was referrals, not memory links. If we took 2 of them out, if he had his old boss rather than a new boss who was a woman, if he just had the boss he's had for 7 years, so that one goes out. If there weren't any tornadoes, he's not reminded of that traumatic memory link in his childhood that was about weather. So what you got left is 3 instead of 5. That makes all the difference. Anyone want to come in there? Mary.
Well, as you're talking, I'm wondering if this is when people have flashbacks, is that is this what's going on in Pellin terms? You know, I understand overwhelming memory links. I guess with some people, they might go low on the wildly destructive pendulum swing, the kind of situation you've been describing with those anxiety. And if it was me with those things, I'd go to a wildly destructive pendulum high, just personally. And I imagined that somebody could go straight to a low. I don't know if you can speak to that. But also just been wondering a lot when people have things like flashbacks, is that what Pellin thinks is going on, overwhelming memory links, or is it something different?
Not necessarily. And again, it's a really good question. And I also, it's a good example of, you know, our methodology, what we have as tools. So someone has a flashback and they can cope with it, okay? Okay, it's awful, but they can cope with it. And of course, that just because it's there on its own. You know, if I use this example, if I use that diagram, I mean, okay, the flashback happens, and that's it, black line. The weather's been really good. The politics are good, okay. The person likes their boss at work, and they're sure of and they have a good sex life around which they have confidence, okay. But if the traumatic flashback comes in, and I guess in a way, what therapy is to, and I don't always want to reduce this work to therapy, because this particular diagram has got real examples elsewhere. And I used the example earlier, which I guess I'm a bit pleased with it. I can't resist repeating it. But, you know, if any of us are having a tough time, and I am in some ways, but what we're looking at, you know, it's sort of been a boring 4 years. Hillary Clinton didn't live up to all her expectations. And, you know, suspicions that Bill was a creep, but we have just elected her for a second term. And this group, and been a pretty good 4 years. I mean, that's a memory link for almost all of us that would change things if we're looking at, okay, just re-elected Hillary Clinton, rather than what we've got. So the reason I'm putting that in, apart from the fact I wanted to put it in, self-indulgent, I think this has applications outside of just the therapeutic world. And while my field of work, my career, has been in the therapeutic world, as you know, I want to take it elsewhere. I want it to be applied elsewhere. And I think people could look at, you know, social times when things are very, very bad, and seem overwhelming. I think the word is right. And think, oh, what are the different threads here? And could we separate them out? Okay. And yeah, Mary.
Well, I'm a bit confused, because I would have thought that I don't even know what it means, a flashback you can cope with, because I haven't worked with people with flashbacks enough to have experienced that. But I would have thought a flashback meaning a traumatic event that kind of overwrites your awareness of the present, and literally seeing pictures, I believe, I don't know much about it. I would have thought that that's an example of an overwhelming memory link, because it's overwhelming your awareness of the present.
No, it is. I guess overwhelming memory links, plural, okay, is a particular tool. I guess it's a particular jargon expression. And I guess what it is looking at and where it came from was, this is technical, but it's also historic, and in the two meanings of that word. My work is not necessarily looking for the moment, the defining moment that happened. That is true of some people, but it's not true of other people. So flashbacks, yeah, because, and I keep doing it because I'm ambitious about it, but, this, BD's flashbacks about what happened to him in the war, but, he's surrounded by, friends of 30 years. His marriage is solid as long as he's prepared to not put his gun under his pillow. And, everyone is telling him that drinking won't work, and he's listening to them. Okay. And then he goes to the vet center. This particular set of, comic book, this particular one was put out to get political support and financial support for vet centers, okay? And this is just full of flashbacks. And if you took his life, without Mike, without Boopsy, without a child, without the counselor, without the doctor who's a lieutenant colonel in a uniform, the psychiatrist, he wouldn't have made it. And there's no question, he would have killed himself. And of course, those particular figures of, American vets who commit suicide are sort of quite high. So in looking at trauma, we want to look, okay, the flashback will be negative and intense and overwhelming, okay? But we'd also want to look at, is the main situation in this person's life that traumatic experience, right? And in BD's it is, there's no question. It's that you can't get over. And had flashbacks about. But what are the other, I guess you'd be looking at what are the other surrounding memory links? And if there are other memory links that are coming in that are negative, can those threads be taken out and put aside? So we're just looking at the flashback. So I guess flashbacks are, and traumatic trauma, particular applications of the Pellin tools. And of course, what you get is, you get the flashback, you get that memory link, and then you get the drug and alcohol problem because dad was an alcoholic who beat up mom, and all the other people he served time with in Vietnam and Afghanistan went into drugs. So you've got traumatic flashback, drugs, alcohol. But even there, the drugs and alcohol have separate memory links. And you know, the way this particular comic strip develops, the reason he goes to the vet center and gets into that is because his daughter is afraid of him, terrified by him. And it's that particular thing that enables him to give up the booze. But the drugs are a different memory link, okay? So he can give up the booze, but still be into the drug. So I think it's useful. I think it's useful to be able to take out those strands. And they come through pretty clear. They come through pretty clear in somebody's life.
Well, like using that was very powerful when you said about the other support that BD had, because if you take a vet with a flashback, overwhelming memory limp, and his wife's already left him, and he can't find work, and he's filled with rage, he can't understand. You know, he goes and shoots people up or something, because that's the different strands all coming in to make it.
Yeah, exactly.
To like force a reaction, right?
Yeah, I would say that when vets have a breakdown or act out the violence, that is probably other things as well as the flashback that is feeding it. It's more than one thing that's feeding it. And when you look at, because, yeah, and that by the way is, yeah, I guess I've got my Canadian memory link going full force today. But the man who developed the Doonesbury characters, his name is Gary Trudeau. He's an American, but he's a cousin of the Canadian Prime Minister. And he was a close cousin of the Canadian Prime Minister's father, the great Pierre Trudeau. So that's my memory, just coming in, you know, getting me, that's fun. Yeah. When you take all that out,
I mean, I don't think I've had, you know, memory links of that magnitude, but I have found the concept helpful when I've had a very strong pendulum swing, and I've been able to, because I was just thinking about the use of it, you know, and you know, I've been able to notice, okay, let's say something's, I feel shut out in my relationship, and it reminds me of losing my dad, and I'm not sure where I'm going in my life or whatever. I don't remember what they were, but I have had times when I've been able to look at feeling really, really bad and say, I didn't use those words, but basically self-analyze, there's several things going on here, not just the apparent precipitating event.
Somebody else would like to come in? Would you like to come in at all tomorrow on this one?
No, I'm listening with interest because I personally just wrestling a lot with dissociation and flashbacks, with taking out numbing medication because of the side effects, the undesirable side effects. So I've been wondering about memory links, and I'm thinking about the strands. And I'm finding it's helpful this time around when I become flooded to also try to name the phenomenon, not just wait for it to pass, but to have labeled it, named it in some way, and to try to share the name with someone else. So it feels like you can draw a diagram with those 5 separate threads. But I find that being able to describe and then I have a better handle for next time it comes. It belongs in a certain category, or hello, my friend, I've seen you again, or I think the worst time is always when something gets you in the back of the neck and you don't have names yet. A name seems to decaffect and is very helpful. And I know labels can be very powerful and powerfully destructive, but the right diagnosis or the right name helps me to separate out and manage. Because the strands, if they aren't separated, it's like rope, it's so strong that trying to bust a hole in something that isn't properly identified yet is a hell of a thing. It's just when you're buried, and it's pre-verbal. I mean, I find that memory links or flashbacks have they're a body sensation for me first. When you talk about a thing, it's already a more identifiable, concrete, tangible. It's a pen. I always find that things are most terrifying because I can't manage them when they are in the pre-verbal place, and there's more sense memory than anything else going on. It's so evocative. When you're talking about the positive memory of being able to smell a room, it's lovely. And it really, my God, in theater work, I mean, that sense memory is so used a lot to help the actor, the feeling tone of a scene or whatever. But I'm wondering if I can try to describe in helpful detail instead of avoid, and just hope that something goes away, but begin to actually capture with language and to be descriptive. And even I was wondering if there was smell and if there's a familiar smell, or if there, what these images are. And I'm not surprised that art therapy could be helpful with trauma.
No, I think they're great points, and David had a way, his particular originality. Something I want to say about that in a moment. I'll take time to do it. But he said, how did he put it? He said memory links almost start with a sort of smell of food. That's why he really made something. He just sort of threw out these ideas, right? At times a bit freestanding ideas almost. But he had a way of saying that the texture and smell of food, it really creates sort of memory links that last throughout our lives. I guess it'd be the smell and texture of really just write toast, piece of toast, and marmalade jam. And I guess someone else could have this is the way he'd say it, could have the memory link of, burnt toast, somehow, deep unconscious is associated in the baby or the toddler with domestic violence. So the smell of burnt toast brings up, those negative memory links, which will create destructive pendulum swings. And that's just the smell of burnt toast. The bit I wanted to say, because it's important to me, and Mary might want to say a little more about it, but and thank you, Mary. But Mary got an email. I might tear up over this, so I've got to be a bit careful. From someone called Sharon, who said, I am David Pellin's granddaughter, and my mother and her sister want to thank you for what you've done with my grandfather's work. And I do not know that was the side of David Pellin's family that broke up before I knew him. That was the marriage that broke up, and the daughters, when I knew him, he saw hardly at all, or very little. I guess I just want to share that here. And do you want to say something about it, Mary? Because you enabled the contact to happen. I'm not good with contacts.
Well, it's just a nice thing since we put the website up that, there was a website there before, but I wasn't in charge of noticing anything that happened. But it's put up with a way that that somebody finding the website can send a message to the website, and then that's forwarded to me. So I got this message and I said, Peter would be really thrilled to hear from you. And I invited her to, really thrilled to have heard from you, sorry. And then I said, maybe you'd be interested in the newsletter, and told her about the YouTube channel. And she followed up with wanting to get the newsletter. So it's, I can't remember the other people off the top of my head, but we've just had a few people from the past turn up that way, which is nice, that especially for, the other side of David's family, his stepdaughter contacted us through the Pellin website. Yeah. So it's nice to feel that there's a few people searching Dave's name, and then they find somebody still working with him.
And that does take us back to Leonard Cohen and my two daughters, and their families are in Vancouver. I just assumed that Sharon was in Vancouver. She might not be in Vancouver at all. She might be in Florida. Who knows?
No, she said that the mother and aunt and herself are in Vancouver or the Vancouver area.
Right. Yeah. I think you told me that. Yeah, but then I had a little thought. Yeah, and I wasn't. I just wanted to announce that here, But I guess for me, that's powerful memory links, and what happens with the I've lost my diagram, but it's straight in front of me. What happens with memory links, we get a positive memory link now, and that sort of goes back and sort of dilutes some of the negative memory links and reinforces some of the positive memory links. The way I talked to you about those early times in Vancouver and And, you know, someone coming, I do not know that person, right? I do not know her mother. That was the part of David's life that was, well, a mess when I knew him, and painful for him. Then all of a sudden you get this, right? There's some sort of continuity, there's some meaning to what we've done, because sometimes I say to my kids, you know, I've devoted my life to the work of a man nobody's heard of. Not quite, but sort of. And then the way memory links come together. Yeah, it's sort of, because I've got K.D. Lang playing in my head, because Tamara put up Leonard Cohen. You know, just stuff comes in. And I think it's a useful tool because we can say that's a memory link. Now, I think with this, because we can look at patterns, it can be quite safe. You know, it's not the, it can be quite emotionally distant a bit if that would be a good idea for safety. Now, you know, if someone's being terrified by flashbacks, you know, I go back to BD, if we've been terrified by flashbacks or just nightmares, he knows where they came from. They're vivid. The flashbacks are vivid. But in terms of the memory link approach, the Pellin approach, he can say, yeah, they're my memory links. But I'm not in Afghanistan right now. You know, I think they're in Massachusetts. My daughter's here, not a crowd of Afghan villagers who I'm going to be distracted. You know, I'm here in this house with this person as my wife and this child who is my daughter. And they are memory links. They are not with me now. Now, I'm not saying we've got the whole truth about this. We've got a tiny little bit of it. And that's why I like to draw on the cover of my this particular edition, you know, our little diagram. We've only got this little bit of the truth. But the title of this is called The War Within. That's what we do with it. It's all inside ourselves. Mary.
I just wanted to say that, like what Tamara was saying about the effect of naming what was happening, which is what you're talking about too. I was just thinking about that is one of the ways when I was in a very compulsive high, because when I couldn't control it. I think this is a really important point that a lot of therapeutic approaches don't get, is that you often cannot do something immediately about the overwhelming feeling, but you can name it. You can say, in my case, I said, I'm in a compulsive high and I can't do anything about the feelings, but I have named the, as I've just got to let Nikki in, I have named the compulsive high, and I will do my best to move myself very slightly down the compulsive high. I didn't have any expectation of getting out of the compulsive high at that early stage, but I put a lot of effort into doing something that might reduce it. If I hadn't been able to name it, then it just has absolute control of you.
Yeah, I think there's a sort of paper for me to write, and when I get back to Facebook, the power of the right label. I mean, we spent decades in Pellin about looking at the how labels don't work, objectify people, all those things. But, we might have, chucked the baby out with the bathwater a little bit. And, PTSD, I'm saying, saved PD's life. And it's interesting what you just said, Mary, name it. And that, that is a phrase that's coming up, isn't it? Say his name, say her name. The people, Cynthia.
I think that's one thing that actually it was a long time ago. It had to do with that with other labels, being in the gay community and stuff like that. But the difference between labels and names, where a label is something that it sort of defines all you, and everybody else is going to make decisions about you based on that label, versus a name which lets you deal with whatever dragon you're dealing with. And it's a subtle difference, because like one of the things when I was I define myself a little differently now, but when I was first coming out, it's like, well, why do you have to label yourself? Well, other people may do it, but like I think like one of the things, if saying just a simple one that hold on, I'm so one of the simple ones in which because and in fact I don't even say the name anymore. I just say, my spouse, who's a woman, and say her name. But there's this thing, if saying something like the word lesbian, if you assume that lesbian means anything other than the fact that my primary romantic and emotional attractions are with other women, if it defines things like, I'm also very feminine, and I had, for a while when I was growing up, I thought I wasn't allowed to be feminine because for lots of reasons. There was I grew up in a household and with friends who thought being feminine meant that you were giving into the patriarchy, and and I had to reclaim that. But that whole thing about, or even like PTSD, or like labels with mental health labels, if it says that, okay, well, because you have bipolar, you can't work, you can't hold a job, you can't do this, then it's negative. If it's just okay, you're going to have mood swings. I guess it has to do with whether the name expands beyond what the label is, like having diabetes, which is one I'm dealing with right now. I hate when they say, oh, diabetics. I'm like, no, I'm not a disease. I have one, but I'm not one. That it implies that you're lazy and you bet. I mean, I do have a bad diet and stuff, but just all these things that other people will throw onto the label that's superfluous to, the fact that diabetes means, well, I do need medication. I do, and I probably got to watch and try to figure out how to manage it. But, it doesn't mean a whole lot of other things that people say it means, I guess, is where I'm
No,
going.
I think that's fundamental. And I think even sort of play around with the difference between labels and names, and the way, say, his name, say, her name has been coming up so much and so effectively. And I think it is, staying on the politics for a moment, Lincoln's all about, he used the word sentiment. You can do anything if you've got the sentiment of the country behind you, and if you can't, you won't. Joe Biden uses the phrase tone. And I think we've got within those two phrases, sentiment and tone, a sort of intention to be in what we call the caring life force, or to go back to Lincoln, an intention to at least try and find out better angels, an intention to find out humanity. And I think it gets at that, has the label used. Because I worked effectively with the custodial side of a prison, the guys who carried the keys. I worked closely with them, and some of them were just great, but not all of them by any means. Some of them were awful. And the way they would use the label to, just sort of define somebody, wipe them out. Do you want to come in at all, Nikki?
Well, I've been thinking on and off a very just a sort of simple thing. It came to me somehow when you were talking about toast. Somebody might associate all sorts of different. Yeah, that's when you said opposite. The smell of toast. It could be domestic violence or something really comforting, or whatever was got attached to that. And so, that thing about any particular individual's memory links, and they might not be big dramatic things or trauma or anything, but it always comes to me whenever I hear anybody say, you might hear something socially or on the telly in, I don't know, relationship programs or just social things or something, where somebody takes umbrage, has a go at somebody else because, oh, well, that's like that for you, but you're a hypocrite because something else, the same thing about me, something like that. And I always think, no, it'll be memory links, person A's memory links makes this a nice thing and this a nasty thing, and person B's might make the opposite be the case. And neither one's a hypocrite. They're just totally being true to themselves. So I wish that was a thing that was known in society. That was the thought that I had.
Yeah, I think the word attach is really right and really important because, one of the reasons I have this is a complicated memory link diagram, okay, that particular one. But the reality is for any of us, memory links are as complex and as multitudinous as, a DNA molecule model of a DNA molecule. There's thousands and thousands of things. That's why I'm working with them and making it practical. I want to use the word pattern. But I think also, as we're sort of expanding this material, sort of how and why did that attach, right? And I guess that's where we've got really intriguing stuff. Because the toast, whether it's positive or negative, whether it's positive or negative memory link, is attached to someone. And someone else might, have a happy childhood or have an abusive childhood. But maybe they don't have any memory links about food, let alone toast. I think it's taking in, I think we've got the tools that can, and that's where I feel we get clarity and preciseness. Because if we could put together a pattern of memory links, anyone working with Pellin could do this. you know, it's one of our earliest tools. You always start with health and strength first. So, you know, trace, you know, okay, Peter Fleming, what are, at this time of your life when you are endeavoring to do certain things in your work, you know, what are your memory links about countries? You know, Australia, England, USA, Italy, back to England, Canada. What are your memory links about office equipment? You know, because, you know, I have a couple of friends who have the sort of same attachment to office supplies as I do. Okay. And others will, yeah, my grandchildren, you know, particularly the ones in London, who I hear most about, and they live in a small flat because house prices in London are absurd. The only way they can afford to live in London is afford to live in a small flat. So there's not much room, and there's 4 of them. And my son and my daughter-in-law are both working from home, and the kids are doing homeschooling, okay? And it's working out. These kids are going to have these memory links about the incredible closeness. And just to share it here, I guess just because I want to, my granddaughter went through 4 days when she was somebody else, okay? And the other, her brother and Mummy and Daddy had to go along with this character she had developed. And they were, Gabe and Ollie at one time were sort of worried about it, okay? But for this, she's 6. You know, she just invented this person. I should know the name, I don't. And she was this little girl. And the little girl was lost, and they found her in the street, and they brought her home. She had a whole story about it. And she really got cross. And then they came to visit me, and my son started telling me about it. Her name's Tula Rose, or TR. And TR did not, this was in the family. This was just the 4 of them. This didn't go outside of that. And he really had to stop on a dime, okay? She didn't want her dad to tell her granddad about this. It was extraordinary. And that's all because of COVID. I mean, they'd be at school, right? They'd be coming home doing all that stuff about telling your mum and dad what your day at school was like. But they're all in this small place, 2-bedroom apartment, you know, in middle of London. So there's a whole lot of memory links. And then, of course, there's the other side of that, right? There's, you know, the families that, whatever reason, most natural thing in the world, cannot cope with working at home and homeschooling and all of that, cannot cope with all that closeness. And the kids are going to pick up really awful memory links. I mean, I think the memory links they will pick up might do them a lot more damage. The negative memory links might do them a lot more damage than the lessons they didn't want. I guess that sort of takes us into an area where this is very hard, where if you really study memory links, it can highlight, almost exaggerate, that's the wrong word, the inequalities and disparities between people and the disparity between people and opportunity. You know, I've got this, you know, thank the good Lord. You know, my youngest child and his wife and 2 kids, this is going to be, I can see it's going to be an enriching experience. And for someone else, it's going to be just the worst. So the inequalities and disparities of opportunity, you know. And of course that, yeah, won't go there, but that happens. That happens. And just to bring in, so we're sort of ending for today in a moment. Oops, sorry. The relation of this to what we've been looking at recently in terms of resistance to nourishing change, and very recently resistance to nourishing change and passive listening. You know, overwhelming referral moments and resistance to nourishing change, you know, can put them together and they wipe us out. Because we must, when we're in an overwhelming referral moment, we've almost got a choice, we've almost got a decision. You know, are we going to fight it or are we going to go under? And if we fight it, you know, we're going to be stubborn, we're going to passive listening, even supportive feedback could simply feel like giving up too much control. You know, I can't go there. I can't trust you to be useful to me, be effective in being useful to me, because, you know, I'm in this terrible place. You know, are you gonna, you know, can you change the political climate? Can you, you know, stop the tornadoes coming into Alabama? You know, could you change who my boss at work is? It will sort of, you know, we get in that sort of a fight place, which just feeds on itself. So that makes for stubbornness, that makes for pendulum swings, that means we wipe out our feelings of accomplishment, that means we don't protect our accepted efforts. And we, you know, another time I talk about we sort of polish our vicious circles. And I think that's where looking at, are there strands in this that I could separate out? And I think, you know, if you read, even if you just pick up stories of people who are surviving over well, okay, I think you'll find they separate out the strands. And I think there's probably a sort of common sense way we approach that. And Pellin always loves to get back to common sense and the phrases of common sense.
Peter, I wanted, oh, sorry, I thought you were.
Yeah, no, go.
I remember you saying if you were to do one thing, and you gave an example, and stick with it, a year later, you will be in a different place. You'll feel better. And so I thought about seeding positive memory links, and that it's not a positive memory link yet, but it's like setting up a repetition and trying to institute some kind of ritual around, maybe not the first try, but the second, but when I feel like I'm close to something and not pushing too hard. So it's an accepted positive memory effort.
Yeah.
And I'll continue to show up for it. So I may be bored going to church, but then I don't write off going to the library the one time that I didn't have a good experience there. It's like a temple, for me when I was in college, and I can smell the library stuff. But that it's adding strands of positive memory links. But what feels really important, and the difference between, say, seeing a cognitive behavioral therapist who tells me to go for a walk, Cynthia, or a doctor who tells you to exercise more or eat differently, don't make me punch you in the throat. And I think the reason is I'm feeling so hostile is because there's something damaging about not acknowledging. So part of naming is also owning. That's
Yeah.
my story without shame. We're not trying to denigrate whatever is. We take those little schmoos with us as well. So I know that I'm going to have negative memory links hiking trails in the city, because that's an awful lot like being in Canada up north in the bush. But I can say, whoop, that just triggered some associations. And then with love, hold the negative memory links, but also with love, want to nourish something else so that I'm not always going to be bound by those ropes that are just the negative memory link. And so I don't know if this is the way that it's meant to be used, but I'll say, oh, we're making look at us, we're starting what might be the beginning here of positive memory links that I can look back later. But the thing that is so important is the ritual and the repetition, and so that there's a familiarity, and there's a tone, there's a feeling tone, and there's community, and these things that make it possible to feel safe. And so anyway, I think that there's conditions that make it possible to move forward. But I'm always saying that I think that the family is such a strong part of maybe even almost the unconscious contribution. It's not talked a lot about, is this idea of nourishing, but family. BD as a family when he gets to the VA. There's ritual, there's the coffee cup with David Pellin and place. And, I think it's one of the reasons that living alone through COVID is making it so difficult to create new ways of living in COVID, because I feel like I need other people in order to make memories.
Well, I think I'm glad you brought that up, because I really want to pick it up when the first time you mentioned it. I think your sort of metaphor to the strands going into a rope, and I almost had an image of a steel rope, I mean, that is going to be so tight in. and it's going to destroy me, and there's no goddamn way I can pull out all the strands because it's just like that. And that's the worst of times. And I think you're right. I think we need the ritual. I think we need the deliberation. We need 22-year-old young women reading poems to the world. And the way you were talking about, hiking in the city, hiking in San Francisco. Yeah, I think we've got to sort of not just do it, but find a way to hold on to it. And that we almost get back to on the positive side, how does the attachment happen?
Yeah.
Now, if you look at a nourishing family, and I guess I say with pride, part of my family was living in London, the repetition just endless. Just endless. The nourishing repetition is endless. And it's a pride I sort of have in Italy. Any child growing up in southern Italy hears multiple times every day, bello, bella, bravo, bravo. I mean, they'd even say it to me, they'd say, oh, Pietro, bravo, bello. I'm some years ago, I'm in this 75-year-old guy, and someone comes up, oh, Pietro, bello, which is you're beautiful. Any child growing up in Italy gets those statements, bravo, bravo, bello, bello. You're smart and you're beautiful. It's just all the time. So I think you're onto something, I'd almost take a sort of bold step and say, as I say about passive listening, there's no passive listening without repetition. I think I'd say there's no building up of positive memory links without repetition.
Yeah.
I just truly believe that. It's just the same as if we're going to come through the bad memory links. One wise person giving us some really good feedback to which we listen, okay? And this person's great who gives us the feedback. It doesn't mean anything. I know that from experience. Sometimes it does. The person who changed my life, but it's almost always repetition.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to adapt the bit I learned from AA, as a, welcome guest, I guess I could say. The repetition is crucial, Mary.
I may have said this before, but what you said just reminded me so strongly that I put that in my one-woman play. I had voices telling me, I was interrupting or was interrupted. I was arrogant. I was too full of myself, things like that. And I was saying, oh, but surely I'm just so lovely when I've come out of my depression, And then I had to stop and say, there's so many people telling me the same things. If I want to get better, I've got to listen to this.
Yeah.
And it was a huge, it was a huge part of getting better that I had you and I had personal friends. And then later John, I wasn't manic by then, but I still had highs, who were prepared to say to the person who didn't want to be told, even when you're trying to be good about it, you're too high right now. And it's challenging, But anyway, sorry, I was supposed to be talking about repetition. It's just like...
No, I think it is Cynthia.
Sorry, this is going back a few threads before this, but I finally had the words for what I think I've actually been trying to say when I've been asking questions about passive listening and stuff, but it finally came, the words finally came with the overwhelming. I think I was trying to find a way where sometimes, I've got a lot of crazy memory links and things that, most people would think of good are not good. Like, praise will actually send me into some negative memory links, which I just worked through for the last couple of days. But I think for me, what I was trying to think, and I was sort of coming up with an idea of maybe putting things in a box where if you're passive listening and there's just too much coming in, either you're passive listening to somebody else's story and it's bringing up memory links for me, or something somebody says in feedback, sort of a way to sort of, sort of funnel it, saying, okay, where it's not necessarily something that, might be very good feedback, but it's it's triggering something from memory links. And, I can't deal with it all at once, or, in that time, or I'm going to start going into a pendulum swing. Like we were talking about overwhelming memory links, sometimes my joke has been recently, my pendulum is doing loop-de-loops. But, there's, sort of being able to, at least, especially if you're in a situation where it's not really appropriate to say, stop, I can't handle anymore, to sort of, filter it at a level so so it can be manageable, rather than, just a whole lot coming in at once. And that was sort of my idea, was sort of mentally, like one of the things that I've naturally do is and I've kind of done it today a bit, because I'm going to be starting writing my book at 1:55. So I can't talk too much longer, because that's the time I've selected astrologically with the help of my teacher. So I can't get too emotional. But just sort of where at times, not, I don't know that it's like dissociating, but sort of like where I put myself, like if I move myself like way kind of back in my head and let the stuff flow in front of me, or put it in a box. These are just sort of strategies that I was coming up with that. And I guess, it's that particular reason to keep thing from going, like I could handle one thing, but I can't necessarily handle three at this time. Or I know I'm not going into a situation where I'm going to have supports around me. I'm going to have to do something else stressful, and I don't want this. I guess that's where a certain level of control helps, or,
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I think we'll stop in a minute,
mm-hmm.
but thanks for that. And just picking up your last word, I think separating out the strands or the threads in an overwhelming memory link moment gives us control. And I think being able to say, okay, I can handle 2 of them, but I can't handle 5 of them together. And that's, bring it back to situations. That's something, single mums have got to say. I think there's almost a common sense and conscious contribution in terms of our words that, okay, I can't handle it all. I can only handle this bit. And I will have control because my children need me to have control. And I think on a common sense, unconscious contributions and stuff just goes in there, and then, how did they, get through slavery? And I guess they, presented with overwhelming referral moments very often. And interesting to use, finishing up, because David Pellin used the word referrals, I use the word memory links. And he said, he used the word referral because it refers back to our past. I just got so much negative feedback about referral means something else in the helping professions. And so I changed it, and it made it much easier to teach. In some ways, I still prefer his words because it has a particular feel to it. But he said the only freedom is the freedom from referrals, okay? Now, if you take that out into a political arena, it's a pretty heavy statement, okay? Contentious, but at the same time has some element of truth in it. And I think I will survive. I will bring up these children. I will create this family, which will be broken up through forces outside of my control. I cannot conceive when we will be free. Okay? But they did it. You know, generation after generation after generation. And on the side, created great music. So, yeah. But I guess they just, you know, okay, that I can't handle. Must have. I'm speculating in the, you know, things I'm reading about currently, and but I think it was like that. So I think you're right. You know, how much can I handle? Okay, we need to stop there. Thank you so much for coming. And I'm in Norfolk in England, which is where Captain Vancouver, who named the city of Vancouver and the island for whom the city of Vancouver and the island of Vancouver were named after. And Kingsland, Norfolk, England has a Vancouver quarter. So I guess I say that's my small tribute to Mr. Cohn. Okay, that's me. Nikki?
I'm Nikki. I'm in Wimbledon, London.
Okay, Tamara?
I'm Tamara in San Francisco, and that's very powerful. If you that freedom is freedom from memory links.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cynthia?
I'm Cynthia. I'm in Kankakee, Illinois.
Okay, Mary?
Mary from Rosarito Beach, Mexico.
Okay, well, once again, the days are getting slightly longer. Spring will happen. And yeah, be safe, okay? Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye.